Well, after seeing the Super Mario Bros. Movie achieve over $1.3 billion in box office money before turning its attention to streaming and physical media releases, it's safe to say that the long-running challenge of turning video games into successful movies has been broken by icons such as Sonic and Mario in their respective cinematic adventures.
Super Mario Bros. Movie took theaters by storm. It's now available to be watched pretty much anywhere a person would like to view it, and its victory is well earned. The world of the Mushroom Kingdom was so successfully translated to the silver screen, it will take multiple viewings to catch all the visual Easter eggs and musical cues that paid homage to pretty much every iteration of Mario's history. But the lead up to this release was anything but smooth. While the first trailer was absolutely warmly embraced by every Nintendo fan who has ever picked up a controller, the reception was decidedly less enthusiastic when Mario spoke for the first time without his iconic voice or accent. Mamma mia, indeed.
After years of voicing everyone's favorite plumbing protagonist throughout the gaming series, prolific Nintendo voice artist Charles Martinet was benched in favor of Chris Pratt, a more recognizable and bankable actor thanks to his well-publicized roles in box office hits such as Jurassic World, the Marvel movie featuring Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as his successful voice acting work in the Lego movie series.
With an extensive history of playing a lovable everyman character across different television shows and movies alike, Pratt was challenged with delivering the voice work for perhaps one of the most well-known gaming characters of all time. And after hearing his interpretation of Mario's voice, a very vocal part of the Nintendo fan base was decidedly less than supportive of his take on Mario's voice. It was, well, let's just say a less stylized version of the Mario voice that we've come to know and love. Chris Pratt was basically performing his version of Mario as Chris Pratt. But after watching this film in both the theater as well as at home, I have a very straightforward opinion on the matter. The movie simply works, and after about 30 seconds of watching it, I totally forgot or at least stopped caring who was providing the real-world voice behind each character, because it's just so well done.
It really is. And apparently so did the rest of the audience, who happily gave the studio over $1 billion of their money for the purpose of enjoying this movie over and over again. And in the end, I am more than just satisfied with the voice work of the movie. I can't wait to see where the studio takes this franchise next. And I'm more than happy to have Pratt's understated and effective voice acting along for the ride.
Well, all this fuss about Mario's voice got me thinking about another iconic voice that often comes in a different form than many of us were expecting or would prefer. I include myself in that group. For many years of my life, I would read the stories of these larger-than-life biblical legends, and I would wish I could hear from God the way that they did. You look in the Bible and you see Moses and his burning bush, Gideon and his fleece, young Samuel literally hearing the Lord calling out to him. And if I'm being honest, I'd get a little bit jealous.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear and see those massive spectacles. I wanted to feel special by hearing the Father call out my name in the night or speak to me at the top of a mountain. I would seek to get a direct answer to my questions, similar to the way that Gideon laid out a fleece on the ground, and received a very visual confirmation of the Lord's direction. Prayed for massive and divine answers to my prayers, the same way Elijah literally called down fire from heaven. The skies above me remained blue. My fleece blanket was as dry as a bowl of frosted flakes without milk, and my bushes only burned if I set them on fire, which should not be attempted without proper adult supervision and a consultation of your local HOA guidelines. Similar to the frustration of the gaming audience, who was not satisfied with hearing Mario's voice coming in any other way than the way they were prepared to receive it, I had a very specific idea of how I wanted to hear and receive the Lord's voice. So let's jump down the warp pipe together and see if we can figure out what I was missing.
If you are anything like me, you have prayed many prayers in your life seeking to hear the Lord's voice in many different situations, from smaller dilemmas such as what career path should we choose to larger life-changing decisions such as who we should marry or what His calling for our life is. It sure would be nice if He just, made these things obvious to us.
For years, I would cry out to the Lord for purpose, direction, or simply answers to whatever predicament I got myself into. And I would leave each time without seeing any of the local flora around me spontaneously combust. That's good for them, I suppose, but I was still looking for something more definitive. I would go to church and I would pray that the Lord would have a specific word of guidance for me. I'd flip to random pages in the Bible, hoping to see a clear yes or no printed on the page. I'd turn on the radio and hope to hear a song that would tell me exactly what I needed to hear. I had a very specific idea of how the Lord was supposed to speak to me. So I'd go to the places where I thought I might find Him in search of the answers I was seeking.
But it didn't hear anything like a loud, audible voice from the Lord calling me by name. I didn't, see the words printed on the page that clearly said, "Oh, move here, marry him, work there, and serve me in this manner." And because the word of the Lord didn't come to me in the manner I wanted to see or hear it, I didn't recognize it for what it was.
Now, the fault was never with the Lord. And as I look at all the fantastical ways that the Lord spoke to these others, I saw that there was a pattern that emerged in each of these circumstances that I didn't see the first time through. So let's see if we can spot a common theme. So in Numbers 22, the Lord used a donkey to speak to Balaam. In Genesis 22, he provided a ram stuck in some foliage as a solution to Abraham and Isaac's predicament. Even that original miracle that the Lord gave to Moses during his burning bush experience it had something common if we look beyond the surface and see the answer that was actually hidden in plain sight all along.
The answer within the unique ways the Lord spoke in each of these circumstances was hidden to me for years as I tried to find his voice in a similarly dynamic fashion. The reality of how the Lord had been speaking to me over the years finally became clear in these verses.
He came to Moses in the burning bush because he was in a desert area with a bush in it. He made Moses' rod a means of providing a miraculous demonstration because it was what was in Moses' hand at the time. It wasn't anything special about the rod. It was just a stick. It was his walking stick. But it was what was present at the time, so it was what the Lord chose to use. Gideon used a fleece because that's what he had access to at that moment. The Lord didn't send some random donkey walking off to meet Balaam and talk to him. He used the one he was already riding on. And the Lord had prepared that ram solution for Abraham and Isaac to be right where they needed it to be. In each of these prayers for guidance, deliverance, or provision, the Lord answered in miraculous ways using his supernatural powers in combination with what was already present in the environment. And because the environments for each of these individuals were different, the way the Lord spoke to each of them was unique as well. They simply had to be prepared and open for the Lord to use what they had previously considered common to be his means of speaking to them.
The Lord's voice will come to us with supernatural wisdom and guidance beyond our ability to comprehend. But his means of speaking to us in our situations will often come differently from the way we would prefer, or even in a manner that he has used to speak to others. He will speak to us through his written word, but it won't directly say, "Move to Alaska," in there anywhere.
Even if there's a heat wave, it's still not going to say that.
No.
He will guide us into understanding his truth through his ministers. But they won't typically point to us in the middle of their sermon and say, "The Lord wants y'all to get hitched." The bushes we're walking past may simply sway in the breeze instead of catching a blaze. And that's probably for the best with how strict arson laws are. But if we're truly listening for his voice and praying with a willingness to hear what he has to say, instead of merely what we want to hear, he has a lot to say through these seemingly common means of communication, such as spending time in biblical study, listening to the voices of those ministers he's gifted with his word, and combining these with our prayer life as we diligently seek to find his voice in all of these common places that we often take for granted.
There was a version of Mario's voice that everyone expected to hear in the Super Mario Brothers movie that didn't show up except in, a small cameo appearance. But that didn't end up having a negative impact on the movie at all. As a matter of fact, the voice acting faded into the background so sufficiently that within minutes it was simply the vehicle that was used to convey the actual story.
Now sure, it wasn't the voice that everyone was expecting or demanding, but it turned out to be exactly what the movie needed. And in the ways that the Lord chooses to answer our prayers, his voice may come to us in a variety of different methods that lack the iconic design of his burning bush example or even a talking donkey. It may come in the stillness of a moment when we're reading a chapter in Psalms for the 100th time, when we suddenly see a verse differently than we've ever seen it before. It may arrive as a confirmation in our spirit while listening to a sermon, but it won't be the situation or the environment that makes his answer remarkable. It will be the very commonness of the circumstances that we are in that will make his direction the star of the story, rather than the means by which it arrived.
Let's not turn our noses up at the way the Lord answers our prayers simply because he didn't send his answer with thunder and trumpets. Sometimes his answer to our prayers for rain comes in the form of a cloud as small as a man's hand.
And while he's still fully capable of answering with fire from heaven, he seems to prefer the intimacy of using a still small voice instead. And just as the very lack of originality in Mario's voice ended up working just fine in the Super Mario Bros. Movie to keep the focus on the story being told, the Lord may not write the answer to our prayers in clouds. He is actually speaking directly to our hearts through His Spirit to remind us of His teachings and guide us in a far better way than any bush, donkey, or walking stick ever could.